Public comment. Are these all on Pete's Harbor? Is there anybody wishing to make public comment on some subject other than Pete's Harbor? All right, then could all of you folks wishing to speak on Pete's Harbor please come up together?
Mr. Chair, if I may just clarify a couple of things. I do know that Mr. Hanig, who signed up to speak, he represents Ms. Uccelli.
Okay.
So I think the other folks that have signed up to speak may be residents or representing the residents of Pete's Harbor. But Mr. Hanig, it does represent Ms. Uccelli.
So why don't
I just
we-
wanted to point that
Okay.
out to you.
Why don't we start? In fact, I got a better idea. Why don't we start with the representative of the property owner? Because I think they will lay out their case, and then I'm going to suspect that the rest of you do not completely agree with the position that they are adopting. So why don't we do that, sir?
Good day. My name is Ted Hanig. I am with Hanig Law Firm in Redwood City, California, and I have the privilege of representing the Uccelli family in Pete's Harbor. It is a little bit difficult for me to address exactly what all the intentions are of the parties today, so we'll have the privilege of going first. I'm not quite sure, and I'm available to you should there be issues that you might want to address.
You have an opportunity
later.
for cross-examination.
Yes, whatever you would like. I did want to point out the history because I think there is a misconception of how Pete's Harbor came to have a land lease. And as you probably know, back in the 1980s, there was litigation that resolved issues between the state and Pete's Harbor, and it resulted in both legislation, a court judgment, and land lease, an act signed by the governor, as you know. So there's a lot of rich history, but the history actually precedes that dispute, and it goes back to September 24th, 1956.
Just 1 second. We're having some kind of technological issue here.
All right, let me do this and turn it off. Why don't I just... There. Siri is talking to me, offering to help. No, thank you, Siri. So, back in 1956, Mr. Uccelli applied for a permit to build where is the outer harbor, which is the subject and the only subject over which the State Lands Commission has any jurisdiction. The State Lands Commission filed an objection in 1956 to his plan to develop the outer harbor and a boat ramp. And then they studied the land patents that were issued to Mr. Uccelli, and I have many copies here for the commission. The letter from the State Lands Commission in September of 1956 withdrawing the opposition to the permit, saying that actually they've determined that it will be on privately owned land. And this office, therefore, withdraws the objection previously interposed, signed by Rufus Putnam, Executive Officer of the State Lands Commission. So in September 1956, and if there's a person who I can leave the copies with, I'd be happy to do that, or if any of the commissioners would like to see them. The State Lands Commission informed the Uccellis that, in fact, the outer harbor was on private property, and in reliance upon that, they built it out. And it wasn't until about 25 years later when there was, in Mr. Uccelli's perspective, some political acrimony involved in the State Lands Commission, and he ended up in a dispute which resulted in that court case, state legislation, a judgment, and then ultimately two land leases, 6856 and 6857, that involved the three parcels of land. Since that time, Pete's Harbor has operated as a marina, and we know from the letter from the San Francisco Bay Conservation and Development Commission in 1984 that all of Mr. Uccelli's obligation was to maintain a marine harbor or berthing facility at Pete's Harbor in order to have that occupancy. So I'll leave that with you as well when I leave, but that is the position that came from the state of California, and it has continued to do so. Currently, there's repair work at the marina. It coincides very well with the time that the property is for sale. But we had a big storm last weekend, and pilings actually came down at the marina. And so the harbor master's decision to undertake the repair effort at Pete's Harbor is quite correct and very safety-driven. I wanted to make the commission aware, apparently it was not, that only a portion of the tenants there are liveaboard tenants. It was stated in the record at the last hearing that all of the boat slips were houseboats or residents, And it also suggested that the marina was going to be taken apart and that we could not guarantee the slips would be rebuilt there again. There's no plan to demolish any slips. There's only a small portion of the tenants who are liveaboard. About 2/3 of them have already vacated as of today's date. And in the tenants that were there, the liveaboard tenants, 90% of them, since 2002, signed a provision, which I'll also leave with you, that states, since the marina is up for sale and no more liveaboards are being admitted, the liveaboard status was granted to you as a favor. I, then they insert their name, agree to leave the slip when this will be required by the marina, with notice from the owner. So the liveaboard slips since 2002 have all had that, and that's why 90% of them have it. So they were all, as far as the liveaboards go, they were all on notice of the intention to sell and to ask them to leave. There is nothing in the leases that requires residents there. In fact, it suggests otherwise. And as you know, the public trust doctrine does not include residents as a public trust use. It's navigation, fishery, commerce, recreation. So there's been some suggestion apparently that somehow that marina area, because of the public trust doctrine, needs to have floating residences there. And that's completely inconsistent with the public trust doctrine, the history, the leases that were signed, and so forth. The Uccellis, though, have another colorful history with the State Lands Commission, which is also, I'm sure, going to be developed and discussed, and so I would like to address it head on. We came up here for a meeting with the State Lands Commission to discuss it on September 18th. After the leases were signed back in 1984-85, Mr. Uccelli made attempts to contact State Lands to ask where to make payment. He was unsuccessful to get a response. He then asked a woman who worked for him, who was later to become his wife and is here present today, Paula Uccelli, to make efforts to contact State Lands, and she did that. She did not get a response as to where to send the check, so then they ran into a state legislature who I've interviewed about the subject, and he attempted to get his staff to find out where to make payment. No answer. He suggested a Republican assemblyman who had also co-authored the bill. The Uccellis contacted him. I've also interviewed him. Same answer. His staff was unable to get an answer where the checks were to be were to be delivered. So since that time, Mr. Uccelli opened an account and he deposited the rent checks, waiting for the state to come and get them. The state never made any contact with him since 1985, whenever that was back then. And the fund has been there being added to. When Ms. Uccelli arrived here for the meeting, she said, "Oh, I have my checkbook with me. How much do I owe you? We can settle up that account." And the answer was, "Well, we don't know. We'll get back to you." After a period of not hearing that answer, I sent up $20,000 plus in cashier's checks to the State Lands Commission, saying, "Here's the last 4 years of rent," because my understanding from our legal analysis is that's the maximum the state is allowed to charge. It may even be less. Those checks have gone unnegotiated, undeposited, or in a fire safe somewhere at State Lands, even though there was no condition on the tendering of that rent. We didn't say it had to be payment in full or it's a waiver or release or anything like that. And in fact, I attempted to contact the chair of the State Lands Commission for Gavin Newsom for discussion and was told a liaison would get back to me, and that's been about 2 or 3 weeks. So I've suffered the same.
Who did you contact in my office?
I contacted Gavin Newsom's office, and the woman who's the...
Whom in my office did you speak to?
I don't have her name with me. I remember speaking. A very nice woman, and she called me back from Sacramento.
If you're going to talk about my staff, you might want to bring names with you when you talk about my staff. I believe your time is up, by the way, as well.
All right. Well, I can tell you the woman was extraordinarily professional and nice to me that I spoke with, and I would hire her in a minute to work for me. She was very pleasant with me. But I never heard back from the staff that she was passing the message on to. That was the point that I was making.
And do you know the woman you spoke to and who she was passing it on to? Because she would have told you.
I have in my office notes because I did speak with her.
Convenient that it's not with you. Thank you.
Well, I'm sorry you feel that way, sir, but I did speak with her, and I do have my phone log from her calling me back and discussing it with her, and she did mention a gentleman who was out of the office on a Friday, but she had email contact with him, and that she would dispatch an email, and that he is the person, it might even be you, I don't know, the person that regularly works with Gavin Newsom with respect to State Lands. And she identified somebody.
When was this call made?
2 or 3 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago.
So do you realize that you say you called the chairman, you were not calling the chairman? The chairman is the controller's office. So
my-
are you?
No, I
was there
called
an issue
Gavin
here or
Newsom.
was an issue here?
I called Gavin Newsom's office.
Thank
So
you.
that is who I understood from the state lands schedule when we attended the meeting, who was the top executive officer. So I must have.
That's just completely incorrect.
Okay, so I had made efforts, but I will say I made efforts to contact through Gavin Newsom's office, and that's how it was passed along to me that I would hear a response, and I did not. But we have this
Let me
history.
stop you for 1 second. Mr. Fossum, do we have an accounting at this point in time of the amount of money that we believe that the leaseholder owes the state?
It's my understanding that a demand letter has been sent to the Uccellis on how much we believe that they owe the state for lack of payment to the commission. And we've asked for documentation as to these alleged attempts to send money in the past to the commission, and we've received nothing.
Okay. How much is the accounting that State Lands has come up with?
We calculated it based on a payment on December 1st. With penalties and interest, it's approximately $406,000, give or take.
Absent penalties and interest, how much would they owe? Just as there seems to be some confusion as to what happened from 1984 onward as to where the checks were supposed to be made. I'd be
Yes.
just interested in knowing if we were to try to get just straight rent, what would that have come to? Do we know?
We can do some quick calculations.
Okay.
I can't do it right
All
now
right.
in my
Yeah,
head,
okay.
but
All right.
let us add some things together.
All right. And you have sent a demand letter. What was the date of the demand letter? Do we know?
November 9th.
Sir, have you received that letter?
I have.
Okay. So at least we now have, where you can pay, how much they're demanding.
We have paid, actually. The letter did not acknowledge that we paid the $20-some thousand that they had on file at the time and did not credit it in that calculation.
All right.
But I would, there are two issues. There's the statute of limitations and there's penalties and interest.
I
And
under-
we
I
are
under-
prepared to,
I understand the
have-
legal issues involved. We at least we've now made that connection.
Yes.
There's an acknowledgement that there's an amount owed, and we can now begin negotiations on how to settle that.
And we do have a meeting scheduled for next week to meet with Mr. Hannig to discuss those
Okay.
elements.
Well, that strikes me as a yeah. All
I
right.
believe that's with the developer next
Oh,
week, and not
okay.
me.
Let me ask a question before we call the residents up, which is, my understanding, this is a fairly large development.
411 homes.
411 homes. What is the need to take a public marina and turn it into a private marina with regard to a upland housing development? That strikes me as the crux of the issue. These folks aren't even fighting your development. They're acknowledging the development can go forward. They are simply arguing, and I've actually, just so you'll understand, I've heard from some folks, I think they define themselves as cruisers, people who live on boats and move around the country to different places, that there is a dearth of these kind of berths, a dearth of berths, I'm going to go follow Curtis, in the Bay Area, and that these slips are needed. And also address another issue for me before we turn to the others. I sit on several boards having to do with below market rate housing. The Bay Area is an extremely expensive place for people to live. We've gentrified the entire coast. These are, I believe, affordable middle-class rents. And I would like you to address for me why it's necessary in building the development to remove these slips from the public.
All right, I'd be happy to address your concerns. First of all, why the connection with the change in the marina to a more restricted marina than is currently there? And you are correct. It is the absolute essential element. It is the only contractual element that's a contingency in the contract between the buyer and the seller as far as governmental issues go. There's no entitlement clauses as normally found. That they're very confident ultimately they'll get city approval, you're incorrect that they are not opposing the development. They have filed an appeal with the city, and there's a city council hearing on January 28th appealing the unanimous Planning Commission approval of the project by the speakers that are here today.
The issue raised, though, has to do with the privatizing of the marina, not the development itself.
And so let me explain why that is such a crux of this. The marina, if it is opened as a public marina, as I understand it, will have parking requirements. The project also will have parking requirements, and there will be insufficient parking on the site to address both the housing that is anticipated and the marina. And so my understanding I'm not the developer. I cannot speak on behalf of the developer. But what I can tell you is for a project of this type to be successful, it has to have a certain amount of density. And they've calculated that the project that they're proposing to be successful has 411 homes. And to make the marina work with that, and I don't know how much margin there is in there, the developer might, they need to have the housing there provide the slips for the marina, so there is an additional parking. The good news, of course, is that when those slips are there and people in the residents, the apartment residents, the 411, are using those slips, other slips become available in the area. So, yes, a boat slip there is being used by a resident, but that resident has moved their boat over from somewhere else, which now makes another slip available in the Bay Area. We have a very limited number of boat slips, so when you and they're commuting closer to their slip. So it makes a lot of sense what they're doing. They have residents using slips that are very close to their boat.
Let me make I think my role here sometimes is to find compromises. It would strike me that we have a city council that has said you need X number of parking spaces for a particular development. A reasonable compromise might be that if the tenants and the developer went to the city council and said require less parking spaces for the development, that you might be able to come out with a solution that would meet everybody's needs. If the only real issue are the number of parking spaces, what is the impediment to that?
Mr. Chair, if I could, there are a number of legal as well as practical issues that are involved in this, as the speaker has made clear, both regarding our lease and the relationship between the owner of the uplands and their tenants. And so I think that as desirable it is to seek a resolution on this, it may not be the appropriate time to get into too many of the details on some of those issues.
Okay. Continue.
So my understanding is not only that the marina has availability for public boat slips, but the conversation is transmutated to say public means liveaboard. And I can find no basis to say in the public trust doctrine that public means liveaboard or below market housing. And I cannot find any, tracing back to Roman law even, I cannot find anywhere where the public trust doctrine says that below market housing is part of the public trust doctrine. So it is possible that you would get the compromise on housing. It is possible that you would get the compromise on parking perhaps, but I don't think that's going to solve the issues that are being presented to you today where people want to insist that they have liveaboard housing at that marina. The marina cannot undertake the repair work, nor can it undertake development if it does develop with residents, liveaboard residents being there. We have had litigation in the past with liveaboard residents when there's construction, and they have had a settlement in our area based on just less than a mile away from Pete's Harbor, where they claimed overspray from construction damaged all their boats, and so they all had to have their boats repainted. So the insurance companies and the contractors will not undertake development and construction work with residents being there at the same time, or boats in general being there at the same time. So there are many obstacles to your question and coming up with an answer to your question. I appreciate compromise, but I also have these other constraints that I have to advise you of that would pose some hurdle that would require us to get over them as well.
I appreciate you thinking you need to advise us, but we have excellent advisors into that, Ms. Lucchese. My understanding, the marina we're talking about is under state land lease, and therefore its transfer for private use would have to be approved by this commission?
Our staff is continuing to look into this. There's a number of different layers. There's the statute that authorizes this use, there's the stipulated judgment, and then there's the lease language. The lease language that operates or that guides this marina talks about the use being a commercial marina and ancillary purposes. A strict reading of that would leads one to believe that the use going from a commercial marina to a private marina that's only accessible by the upland residents would require an amendment to the lease to proceed.
And if I could add, if you look at the graphic up here, what you'll see is a number of elements. When we talk about a marina, there's the internal marina within the development that the legislature basically said the state doesn't have any ownership interest in. There's some docks out in Redwood Creek that's actually granted to the local government by the legislature for their management. There is the area in red that is the part of the legislation as well that directed the commission to enter into a lease. The provisions in that are different because than the other lease that the commission has entered into, which is in the lower left area. That area had already been determined to be State Lands Commission owned as part of an early title settlement, and so was not involved with Mr. Utility or the legislation at the time. And then you can also see that there is some issues outside the in the what I would call north area that appear to be within the grant to the city of Redwood City, and also appear to be within the commission's lease. So there is a number of issues to resolve on this, and legal issues, boundary issues, and interpretations that are going to take some time to iron out, I believe.
Thank you.
Did I provide enough information to respond to your question, sir?
No, I'd still like the name of my staff that you talked to.
I'd be happy to provide that to you. I want to get back to my office. But again, she was very professional, and I compliment her, actually.
Ms. Madden.
Okay, thank you so much for taking the time to hear from us today. I do have a few documents that I would like to hand to you. I don't know if you've seen yet communicated from the staff a picture of the development. I think it helps. I also have the original complaint by the state of California in 1981. Oh, is that, yeah. I'm almost done. In 1981, and it details the decades of good faith effort and negotiation that were put into working with Mr. Uccelli before they brought the action. Attached to it are many exhibits, and this, I believe, was in a later discovery memo, many exhibits that show for years in the 60s and 70s that the Army Corps of Engineers repeatedly advised that he didn't have title, he needed permission. So I'd like to introduce these. Kim, sorry. So I do want to clarify that it's absolutely a correct statement that we are not opposed to their land-based initiative at all. We respect the right of Mrs. Uccelli to retire and to sell the property for the person who wants to buy it to develop. We're not opposed to the residences. We do believe that this was fast-tracked at the city level, and there's a lot of talk about for sale for 10 years. There's not a for sale sign at the property. I've been looking at it to move down there since '96, and I've never seen a for sale sign. There's a hallway with all kinds of commendations and newspaper articles, and there's nothing up there that shows the one article one time that was run where Pete Uccelli in the Chronicle said that he wanted to grant an option to the developer, which is the Pauls Corporation of Denver, and represented by Mr. Paul Powers, and he's here today. So that was a long time ago. In 2002, there was a clause added to the back side of the 4-page lease that said, since we are no longer admitting liveaboards, your status here is a favor. And that was in 2002, and for 10 years, they admitted liveaboards by the hundreds. And when I say that, they come and go. There might be cruisers, there might be recreational boaters. And this is not at all the issue is the public trust use of the Outer Harbor. And that is the issue here for the State Land Commission, what the commission will decide on when the proper application is made by the developer, which or owner, which we hope will be sooner rather than later. So we were advised of this development. Since 2002, there was one proposal in 2003 to build a very large, like a little city on this whole inlet, like a Redwood Shores, and the voters voted it down in 2004. When they voted that down, both the ordinance of Redwood City and the initiative, the liveaboards and the recreational boaters, the commercial harbor would have stayed. Since that vote down by the people, there has not one time been brought to the people a new proposed development. There was an effort in 2008 that was never made known to anybody. Due to the economic conditions, the developer withdrew it, went back to Denver, and not until this July 2012 has anyone ever heard of a development since 2004 when the voters voted it down. And one thing I do want to slip in there, we've been out there, we talked to the voters, and we thought, well, let's just see what they think, the people of Redwood City. Do you want to keep the Outer Harbor commercial and accessible to the public instead of private dock slips for high-end residential luxury condos? And we got 600 signatures in a long weekend, and we got 1,000 change.org support. And we haven't been back out there because we have been going to the Planning Commission and to the City Council. We do have an appeal, but you're absolutely right, Chair Gordon. Our desire is that we work with them to perhaps have a few fewer apartments so that there's enough parking to keep the Outer Harbor commercial. And so what I wanted to say is that it was very much fast-tracked. When it came back this July, we were actively deceived for 2 months and told that there had been no, permit filed. We were met with on September 20th. The State Lands Commission was met with on September 18th, 2 days before. The neighbors and the car dealer were met with 3 weeks before the most important parties in this dispute. The city attorney, the assistant city attorney in the open hearing public record has said, if the State Lands Commission does not consent to the outer lease there is the one that was on the Leslie Salt land. That requires affirmative consent and has more of the traditional terms and conditions of the standard State Lands Commission lease. That requires affirmative consent. The other ones allow transfer, but that would only be transfer of the use that's consistent and permitted, which is a commercial harbor. It says it in the lease. And there's a lot of different provisions in the lease. It was actually, mandated by an act of the California legislature in 1983, which was emergency legislation. And, there's all kinds of provisions of that act, and one of them declares the existing commercial harbor and marina open for the public to be consistent with the public trust. So there's an act of the statute. I don't know, Mr. Henning just made an argument that for 50 years they've been using this marina to make millions and millions of dollars inconsistent with the public trust. That's the unavoidable conclusion to that argument. So here we have, it's an existing use, it's consistent with the public trust, and with people, we have somebody who's going to read a statement, a Vietnam veteran's lived there 20 years, has paid $250,000 in rent. He could find where to pay his rent. And, he is at the VA today because he's having a surgery. He needs to go to the VA 3 times a week. We have a woman that couldn't come here today because she was hit by a car out of the Villas, which is next door, and she's been in just terrible pain for years. And she's unable to work, and so they're living on one income where she used to be a very vibrant phlebotomist, and she can't come here. We have other people who specifically asked this June, hey, we saw some surveyors, are you selling the property? And they were told no. And so they acted in their detrimental reliance, and they have a houseboat, actually a floating home, that there's nowhere to put it now because all of the other slips have been filled. So Mr. Hannig raises a lot of factual arguments that, people fled in the first few weeks and took up all the remaining slips. So that's what I want to say is that the city attorney, when I said in open hearing, she said, if you don't consent to the outer lease and you don't approve the change in use, this particular permit that has been issued will go away. And so that means everyone can go back to the drawing table and say, why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you ask the voters? And so what I wanted to say is when we go out and we ask them, since we've been in the press, we've been in, on TV, LA Times, all of this, they've been finding us. And they're finding me on LinkedIn, and they're finding us and saying, we don't want you guys to go. So the voters want the voters. I can tell you that. If we put this to an initiative and said to the Redwood City, look, all you have to do is come up with parking. And right down the road, there's federal parking for the Bay Area, the open space across, they're restoring the wetlands. There is space for parking down there on the street. The city has a right to have part of this road that goes in. It was the Leslie Salt easement, and it's private now at 1 Uccelli. The city could make that its street sidewalk. So there are options here, and there is so much room for compromise. And really, I just feel that, 2 days before we were told, it was just assumed, and it's been like this since the 50s, it was assumed that they really feel they own that. It's been described in the press by Mr. Hanning as an ironclad 49-year lease that she has absolute rights over. And so I think really that what I want to say is please don't allow the current, what we've heard potential for, is that the current money collection, there's members of the assembly that are involved in this, and we know politically that there may be a desire to, go down the road of looking at all the facts, the good faith, et cetera, and there may be a potential for settlement on that. We'd really like to say, please don't bring this privatization into that settlement. Please consider it the separate action that it is for public comment. And finally, and I think probably the most important thing that I came here for, is to ask, and I know we're not on the agenda today, and so I don't expect this today, but sometime between the commission and the staff over the next few weeks, and to see if there's some way we could keep the status quo. So it is true that the Inner Harbor is now, the act deeded it to Pete. If you look at old maps, the slough wrapped around, and it was Smith Slough. And so that's been resolved by the act now, and they can have that. I want to say that next door, the Villas, has 150 residents, and 3 have boats. That it is very much, maybe 5 tops. It's a 2 to 3% of this 411, and if it gets reduced to 360 or something, they're going on the 40 density units per acre and making an argument that there's no way they can make money with fewer than that. And they also have residences planned in the 100-foot BCDC space. So I'm really calling this a place map. What it was intended to do is to give them a vested map for the most that they could ask for 2 years. When they built down the road at one marina, they closed, somebody else will talk more about this, they closed 400 slips and eliminated 300 of the same type of people, recreational boaters and liveaboards. And this is just vitiating recreational boating in Redwood City. There's nowhere to go. The port commissioner said we were sleeping on Mrs. Uccelli's couch. It has just been awful at the city level. So what I want to say is that if there's any opportunity, here's the timeline. We're told that we need to be out by January 15th. We will face eviction proceedings under the threat of attorney's fees. Our appeal is heard 2 weeks later. There is a State Land Commission meeting in February. We hope that they would have, applied for this permit to have an amendment to change the use. They might not do that for Lord knows how long. And we are prepared. We have, I happen to be an attorney. We have internet, startup people. We have investment. We have Vietnam vets that are on a very regular income and they pay their rent. We're prepared to get insurance. We're prepared to pay rent in escrow. We're prepared to show you who we are and that we can, in good faith, these people have been taking care of this place like it's their own home for 20 years. And so that's what we're asking for, is some kind of status quo, some indication. We know that it takes months to work out all of the complexities of this. There is the act, a judgment, 2 leases. There's a legislative intent, and I've gone and found it all. And, I have the letter from the governor. This is what I want to say. In the act, it was never proposed that in front of the legislature was the privatization for residential use of public trust land. So the act absolutely does not give that. It was like there's the construction, statutory and contract construction that, and anything that what's not before a judge is not decided. This was not before the legislature. It was not decided.
Who authored the act?
So it was Dominic Cortese. I believe his son is an elected official in Santa Clara County and is on the BCDC now. And we haven't heard, anything from him. And the year before, I would say, I have the letter here to the governor. The year before it was Naylor. There were 2 nays. I think one of them was Maxine Waters. And I can give you everything I brought today because I have copies of it. Are there any questions that I can answer?
I don't think so. Jennifer?
Okay, thank you.
Next.
So I don't know what to say. I think Allison said everything. But my name is Leslie Webster. I've lived at Pete's Harbor for over 4 years. I live on a houseboat. It's not a floating home. It has an engine, and it's mobile. I'm one of what was, on September 20th, 144 liveaboards living on 86 boats at Pete's Harbor. I'm here as a member of Save Pete's Harbor 2012, a coalition that wants the harbor to remain a commercial marina. What has been overlooked elsewhere is that we actually support the sale and development of the harbor, but we encourage reasonable and responsible waterfront development. We believe that Pete's Harbor should continue to be open to liveaboards, cruisers, and weekend boaters. We believe it should remain a place where the public feels invited to use the lands, waterways, and resources, and we are concerned about the possibility of a non-public trust use. As it is, Pete's Harbor is an open harbor where the public feels free to walk or bike around the ungated property, wander down the docks, come watch the fireworks on the 4th of July, look at the boats, talk to the people who live on them, go kayaking. There are no gates, but it is a safe place precisely because of the liveaboards. This existing usage is consistent with your regulations and your goals. If it continues as a commercial marina, you can be assured that it will generate revenues, enhance the economy, and assure the ongoing viability of the state lands while protecting the environment. We are concerned about the development plan that has been fast-tracked through the city of Redwood City. This development is proposed by an out-of-state developer who previously cleared a nearby marina of over 400 slips and did not rebuild them. The same developer has stated that he has no interest in a marina at Pete's Harbor. His project at Pete's Harbor pays lip service to the public's enjoyment of the trust lands, when in reality it will be a place where the public will feel they are trespassing in a private luxury housing complex. It will not enhance the public's enjoyment of the trust lands. It will sacrifice much of the public benefit of Pete's Harbor for private advantage. I know that you're not addressing this topic today, but I urge you to consider it carefully and not to consent to assign the lease and allow the change of use from commercial to private residential without adequate public participation and comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker.
Good afternoon to the Commission. My name is James Lee, and I'm a Redwood City native. I was born and raised there. Like many people who are born and raised in Redwood City, I do have memories of Pete's Harbor as a child. As Leslie mentioned, it is a place that you go to see fireworks. It is a place that you go to feed the ducks, to see the water, get a little bit of nature. And so I don't personally live at the harbor myself, but I am a Redwood City resident, and I really care about what's happening to this community. It is a community. It's almost, with the liveaboards and the folks who live in their mobile homes at the harbor, there's almost 200 people, or there were almost 200 people before this process started. I want to talk about, before we came here today, we've actually been lobbying over a few blocks down at the Capitol. We've talked to our state assembly members, state senators, and all the staff members we talked to have said, so, why are you here? Why aren't you not at the city level? And one thing I want to convey to the Commission today is that we have made no headway at the city level. The folks at Save Pete's Harbor, folks like myself who are Redwood City residents, we've gone to multiple planning commission meetings, city council meetings, and it's like talking to a brick wall. It's really hard to get any sort of headway. And the city recently also passed a new set of guidelines for how land use appeal hearings will be held. And those were voted on by the city council a week after the Pete's Harbor residents filed their appeal with the city. There was one council meeting we attended where Ms. Uccelli was sitting in the back row with a planning commissioner just chit-chatting, not even outside of City Hall, but just chit-chatting. And that's fine, we can have any personal relationships we want, but it just shows the uphill battle we have when we're trying to make our case to a city that is a friend of the landlord in this case here. The folks at Pete's Harbor, when this process started, they should have been able to go to their city officials to ask for help, whether it was for relocation, mitigation, compromise, like we were talking about. Instead, one of their port commissioners, Loriana Castrop, came to a city council meeting and called, and she is a friend of Ms. Uccelli, and she came to a city council meeting to call these Redwood City residents couch surfers, people who had an artificial sense of entitlement after paying thousands of dollars in rent for decades. This is what we're dealing with, and when we talk to elected officials, what we always get is that this is not in their purview. What happens in the city is not in their purview, even though the general plan for the city says that Pete's Harbor is great because it adds to the affordable housing element for the city. And so that's why we're here at the state level. We want you to do what you can that is in your purview. We are here to ask that you refuse to consent to assign the lease, and certainly refuse to transfer the lease if there's going to be a change in the use of the marina from commercial public access to private and residential. Thank you so much.
Next.
Good afternoon, Commission and fellow Californians. My name is Joseph Rosas. I am not from Redwood City, but I am a resident of the peninsula. I'm from Sunnyvale. And I am an activist that has been involved in low-income and affordable housing issues along the peninsula. Even though the issue of liveaboards isn't strictly part of the public trust, it is definitely part of the public good. When we claim to be an area, a city, and a state that is welcoming to our veterans, where we claim to cry at their hardship and wax poetic about all our efforts in their favor. I have here a letter from a Vietnam veteran who was referred to earlier. His name is Buckley Stone, and he was unable to be here because he is having surgery, and I would like to read his letter and add it to the public record. My name is Buckley Stone. I am 54 years old and have lived a simple life afloat for 20 years. I joined the U.S. Air Force after high school. In 1977, I became terminally ill with lymphoma and was hospitalized for 18 months and survived experimental chemotherapy. During that time, I suffered renal failure, cardiopulmonary embolism, blindness, and a host of other infections and side effects. I was clinically dead twice, and my parents flew back east both times to bury me. I was air evacuated from PZ Air Force Base near New Hampshire to the National Institute of Health in Washington, D.C., where I received medical care. In 1987, I was classified as being in remission and was deemed cured after 5 years without treatment. When I was well enough to put myself through college and worked in the electronic industry for 25 years, I did not sit at home and collect a check from the VA. I went to work, and fortunately, I put a lot of money into my Social Security, which I rely on for part of my income. In 2000, I fell ill again with hepatitis C from the transfusions I received and had to have another year of chemo. During this time, I lost my career and my income. I was placed on permanent disability by the VA and have been living on a fixed income since 2002. I have been receiving medical treatment at the Palo Alto VA, and because of my extensive, complicated medical history, I must be able to continue my medical treatment at this location. These complications and side effects have put my immune system in serious risk. It is critical to my health to remain as close to the VA as possible. My wife, Wendy, is my primary caregiver and takes care of my day-to-day needs. Without her, I would have died again. Please save this piece of Redwood City history and our community. Thank you for your time and interest in this matter. Now, it may not be part of the public trust to take care of our veterans, but it is part of the public good. And as a more personal issue and an amateur photographer, Pete's Harbor is just absolutely gorgeous. Just looking out over the boats at night, any time of day, you see the lights of 101 and the businesses across the bay, and it's absolutely amazing. Please save Pete's Harbor. Please allow us to negotiate with developers. Please deny the renewal of the lease. Thank you.
Next witness.
My name is Sean Cartwright, and I wish I was a famous soccer player. Pete's Harbor is a community that matters. How many people in this room actually know everyone on their block? You do? You're the only one. You're the only one who raised your hand, so you're lucky. The people at Pete's Harbor, they know everyone on their block. They know everyone in the harbor. It's the only place that I've ever seen. And the other night, there was a car that crashed in my neighborhood, came up on the sidewalk, drunk, the whole thing. How many people drive up on your sidewalk? Crashed into a palm tree. How many people came out in my neighborhood? Me and a guy down the block. That was it. 3 o'clock in the morning. But in Pete's Harbor, they would all come out. They would come out if you pulled up with like a fruit basket. Hey, welcome. How you doing? Somebody new in the neighborhood. That's how they are. And that's why it's a community that matters. And that's why we're here. And that's why I'm here. Because honestly, when I first heard about it, ooh, a bunch of people on boats getting thrown out. Who cares? I thought because it was a bunch of rich people who could afford to live on boats. But it turns out, because it's Pete's Harbor, it's one of the biggest BMR communities on the entire peninsula. And to lose something like that, particularly as somebody who grew up on welfare, that's huge to me, to lose a big chunk of BMR housing. Redwood City doesn't have enough to begin with as it is. I find that to be a travesty that we would even consider doing something like that. You know, you can live aboard a boat for $700 a month. That's kind of nice. You go on vacation, you just put away and go someplace new. That's really nice. I wanted to say that over 24 jobs are going to be lost due to business closure. Many of those businesses are owned by the people that live at Pete's Harbor. We've already covered the veterans issue. We've got children that are going to be like having to switch schools. And there are 91 current registered voters at Pete's Harbor. So, bet you didn't know that, huh? Also, I'm sorry, I've got all the notes here. Paul's Corporation has a history of using non-union and non-prevailing wage. So what they did at their last building, the one right next door that they built, was they managed to get the unions, the trade unions, to go ahead and fund their EIR. And then after that, they still use non-prevailing wage and non-union labor. So there's no reason to believe that they're not going to do that again. It's a really nice trick. So as somebody who believes in labor, I find that to be a big issue. And I believe that everyone should be paid a prevailing wage, particularly as somebody from San Jose, and we finally upped our minimum wage. So, woohoo! Proud of that. Sausalito just went through the same issue. Sausalito just went through the same issue of them trying to get rid of the boaters. And Peninsula Marina, anyone? Yeah, there is no Peninsula Marina because they got rid of them. They got rid of them. The same people got rid of them. So we've got to stop this. This is what's happening right now, is getting rid of these boaters, getting rid of liveaboards. And then you push them out, and then they anchor out, and then what happens? They end up crashed along the rocks, and then you don't even have the boat. And is this what we really want to do? Is this what we really want to do to boaters? Is this what we want to do to the biggest BMR community in the peninsula? Is this what we really want to do to an entire neighborhood, a community that matters? In closing, I see my little red dot. This is a breach of the public trust. I know my colors. I watch Sesame Street. This is a breach of public trust. And I implore you not to assign or transfer the lease and not to change the use from commercial public access marina to a private residential one. Pete's Harbor, it's a community that matters. These people matter. And what's being done is wrong, and it's dishonest. More than anything, it is completely dishonest. Thank you.
Next witness, I think last one, Leslie Webster. Oh, she already spoke. Okay. Do we have anybody? Is that it? Okay. No, I think commissioners. Chris, do you have anything? Let's go on. Jennifer. one short statement, which is at least for one commissioner. Some knowledge of the public trust. Had you gone back 25 years, as recently as 25 years ago, the view of the public trust in California, and in some instances, was that it was simply a matter coming down from Roman law of navigation and the right to fish. We have expanded the public trust as the years have gone by to take in recreational uses and environmental uses. It's a living, breathing document, living, breathing common law theory over 2,000 years old, and will continue to evolve. Whether having housing in a public trust use is appropriate, I think we're going to have to reach that decision going forward. But it strikes me that there's a compromise to be reached here somewhere. And if that means downsizing the development a little bit or finding parking somewhere else, at least for one commissioner, that will be something we will look at very, very seriously. I can't speak for either of the other two commissioners, but we will be looking for a way to find a way out of this and keep the housing that currently exists. Anything else? All right, that concludes the open meeting. We'll now adjourn into closed session. Will the public please clear the room? Thank you.